Facebook is fine.
Facebook really spooked investors on both of those fronts.
The company lost $200 billion in market value yesterday.
Hello and welcome to Tuesday Newsday, your number one resource for the entire week's worth of VR news. This time, actually on a Tuesday. Meta and Facebook are in some very hot water, and some of the cracks in Meta's Metaverse are really starting to show. And we're gonna talk all about that. Microsoft's AR and VR department reportedly is in a state of turmoil and confusion, and Mozilla shuts down its VR-based web browser. This is a turbulent week for the VR industry. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's just get right into the news. First, let's start this talk with Microsoft. Believe me, it all comes full circle. So, Microsoft has been in the AR and VR industry for quite a while now, both pioneering early consumer VR with Windows Mixed Reality and practically setting the standard for enterprise augmented reality with the HoloLens. HoloLens in general has been successful and has pushed the industry quite a bit, even signing a $20 billion contract with the US Army. But insiders report that Microsoft has been quite shaken up recently, leading to a very possible cancellation of the HoloLens 3 as well as some of its more secretive hardware endeavors. This comes from a Business Insider report stating that Microsoft has partnered with Samsung for specific hardware development, while Microsoft works on further software and operating systems for XR in general. And this isn't to say that Microsoft is pulling out of its AR and VR developments. The company has stated both in words and with investments that they're extremely committed to having their stake in the metaverse. But according to this report, two things have their mixed reality and virtual reality teams in chaos and turmoil. For one, the team seems to be split. On one side, Microsoft has made great leaps in hardware with devices like the HoloLens, and they believe that they should continue with hardware development. On the other side, they believe that Microsoft's blood and heritage is in OS and software development, and they should instead focus on developing the software platforms that other companies use within that metaverse instead of the hardware. The other problem is a little more interesting, and obviously it's impossible to tell through secondhand industry reports which came first, but Microsoft is losing people, specifically to Meta and their Reality Labs department. I mean, everyone is across the industry, including Apple, but Microsoft has lost quite a few very key players on the HoloLens and mixed reality team to Meta. Whether this happened because of a shift of focus to software rather than hardware, or whether that same schism of ideas came because of that exodus of key players is unknown. But point is that Microsoft is likely currently plagued with, quote, confusion and strategic uncertainty, and one sentence of this report says the most here. There's been a conscious pivot to make investments within mixed reality be financially sound. And here's where we take a bit of a serious turn away from just Microsoft. We're watching two very different strategies unfold right before our eyes regarding the metaverse or Nexus. And if you take a look at Apple, I suppose three different approaches. Microsoft seems to be trying to make safe and calculated approaches, doing what makes financial sense for them. And if the rumors about Apple's mixed reality devices are true, then they're taking a splash approach, similar to their entry into the smartphone business. And then you have Meta, resorting to complete guerrilla tactics. To put it simply, and I'm not going to sugarcoat this, they are attempting to control everything. Currently, there is a talent war raging within the AR and VR industry, Meta in particular, going on a 10,000 person hiring spree last year for Reality Labs, poaching talent from Google, Microsoft, and Apple, leading to those companies even increasing benefits to retain their current employees. Not to mention, we all know, of course, about the Quest 2 and its immense impact on the VR industry. Meta almost certainly selling hardware at a loss like very few companies in the world could even attempt. And good news for Meta and VR in general, but the most recent Steam hardware survey shows record-breaking growth for VR headsets on Steam. VR users now accounting for more than 3.4 million Steam users, increasing by 29% year over year. Meta headsets now account for 2/3 of all headsets being used on the PC, and still, of course, 100% of all standalone headsets. Meta has total dominance right now. But the house of cards is falling apart, and it's happening fast. This massive spending spree, acquisition spree, and talent grab is costing Meta billions of dollars. And frankly, they're showing all of their cards. And the events that just unfolded show the possibility for some very big shakeups in the world of VR and AR. Meta just had possibly one of the worst weeks in the history of businesses. The company's stock prices dropping by an astounding 26%. And to give you an idea of just how much market value that is, Meta just experienced a $251 billion reduction in market cap. And Mark Zuckerberg himself just lost $31 billion of net worth, making up for an overall 30% stock price drop for the year for Meta entirely. And this wasn't just for one reason or another. There are multiple massive issues with Meta right now, and it's going to have a massive effect for the VR industry and AR, of course, moving forward. For one, for the first time ever, Facebook's user base stopped growing and even shrunk in some ways. Facebook missed its growth quota, and investors immediately grew wary as confidence dropped. On top of that, earnings were far lower than expected, with Meta saying they lost $10 billion in 2021 on Reality Labs' AR and VR endeavors, which is likely where all of those new employees, R&D projects, advertising, and selling hardware for a loss came through. But this isn't even the biggest thing. It seems Meta has taken a bite from a poison apple. Facebook makes its money on your data and either serving you advertisements or selling your data to advertisers. This relies on tracking everything you do on and sometimes even off of Meta platforms. And Apple has been sticking a knife in Meta's strategy for a while now. In November of last year, releasing iOS 15.2, users now have a choice to opt out of all tracking that apps do, also giving you a choice in what apps track you and take your data, even transparently showing what each app is doing with your data. This one move reportedly is costing Meta billions of dollars, as suddenly overnight, if you were an iOS user, more than likely your data tap was just turned off, inaccessible to be harvested, sold, or given targeted ads to. An analyst saying, quote, "People can't be targeted the way they were before. It breaks the model. It requires rebuilding the foundation of the business." And when you really look at this, the largest loss of any company stock price ever, all because of an iOS update that blocks tracking, Facebook no longer growing, and an egregious spend on Reality Labs. What happens next quarter if Facebook shrinks even more, or if Apple cripples their business model further, or if Google or Microsoft follow suit with their tracking block, or if Reality Labs continues spending money like this, poaching the industry of talent and bankrolling hardware that can't be competed with? What does the VR industry look like when one company doesn't control every corner of it? If similar losses are reported again next quarter, I can very realistically see Meta cutting Reality Labs' budget severely, possibly hurting projected growth for VR in the short run, but positively leaving gaping holes for competition on a more level playing field. Meta has been ruthless with its guerrilla techniques, seemingly building the metaverse with the facade of being its biggest player, but like I said, its house of cards is falling apart. This isn't sustainable, at least not in the projection that we're seeing here. Meta's fundamental strategy of tracking data on every living being that touches its service is at risk. It's getting fat with its greedy gobbling of talent, and we'll just have to see where this goes. I will say though, that this Nexus or Metaverse is a very long-term idea for everybody, companies and users alike. It's not something that is built over a year and released. Fundamentally, it's the next stage of the internet and how we operate within it, and it's never going to be finished. This is just one play and one view into the history of the future as we know it. There's a chance that Meta could bounce back with a new service or a new headset and everyone's on their side again, but that requires fundamental change, something that I'll believe when I see it, and I welcome that change. But now it's time for a meme break. Funny that this meme popped up. It's actually a very weird phenomenon. You'll be on Reddit or a forum talking about a VR game, and out of nowhere comes a random pancake gamer just to butt in and say that they don't care about VR. Without fail, it happens almost every time. But now, back to the news. Speaking of competition for Meta, PlayStation VR 2 is looking to be a very interesting piece of hardware after its announcement about a month ago. Not much is known of its price or for availability yet, but with 90 to 120 Hz, 2000 by 2040 resolution per eye OLED displays, inside-out tracking, upgraded haptics, and eye tracking, it's something that I'm really interested in. And I know that a lot of developers are also interested in developing for the PSVR 2 upon its release. But a recent press release from Tobii mentions that they may secure a contract to provide the eye tracking for Sony, which would both be a massive deal for Tobii and great news for the PSVR 2, as Tobii's eye tracking is widely regarded as some of the best out there, further providing a boost to the PSVR 2 using dynamic foveated rendering. Plus, if this does happen, it promises that Sony's next headset will have actually good eye tracking, which isn't always a promise. And in case you're wondering why this is a big deal, well, PSVR 2 will, as long as it releases on time in the next year, will pretty much be one of the very first mass consumer headsets to ship with eye tracking, something that really would make it stand out, setting a standard for consumer headsets moving forward, both for game and software capabilities and performance. The reason why we don't see eye tracking stuff now is because, well, not many people even have the technology. But once more people have it, it will change a lot. And speaking of hardware, the HP Reverb G2 V2 with all of its hardware and software updates is now being sold in far more countries as of this past week. Previously, the G2 V2 was only available in a few countries, but this has recently been massively expanded to bring the headset to a wider audience. The reception to all of the hardware updates being, quote, phenomenal, as HP says, with the full update to bypass WMR software entirely now rolled out to everybody. If you are interested, I already have a full review on the G2 V2 that I posted a couple months ago, so go give that a watch after this if it's something that you're into. I generally really liked all of the hardware and software updates, and the screen is still unmatched for the price, but it does have a couple drawbacks. Mozilla just announced it will be shutting down its VR-based web browser FireFoX Reality, which sort of comes as a shock to me. FireFoX Reality was my web browser of choice when in VR, as it works pretty much better than any of the alternatives out there for using a controller while browsing the internet, and had a lot of really great WebXR functionality built in, but Mozilla says that the browser will be removed from stores in the coming weeks. Also, in their announcement when declaring why they are shutting down FireFoX Reality, they stated it's mostly because their goal was to help build a good XR browser, not to incubate the technology as a platform for their own uses, which is exactly what they help to do. Mozilla is directing current Reality browser users to a new browser, Igalia, which is based on the FireFoX Reality source code, and supposedly is a general improvement to much of the work that Mozilla has already done, and it's launching on all platforms within the next few weeks. But now it's time for question of the week from Jeff8Steve. Poor Steve. What is your main PC VR headset? Is it the Index or Vario? And while I love the XR3 and Vario Aero, my main headset is still consistently the Index. Even though the resolution is far better on Vario's offerings, I still haven't found a headset that works as well as the Index for general PC VR usage, particularly regarding Steam VR and streaming and doing things like VR chat. The Index just has such a good mic and audio, good enough displays and comfort, while all of Vario's headsets don't even have built-in audio or microphones. It seems that the Vario is just way better at specific tasks and maybe productivity, while the Index is a more streamlined daily driver sort of thing. And that was question of the week. Leave your own down below and I may just answer yours next. I am also still working on the Zenith review. Sorry it's taking longer than normal, but the giveaway for Zenith keys is still going on in my Discord server, so come on in for that, and a great VR community as well. I want to thank all of my Patreon supporters, especially my Omegas. I couldn't do any of this without you. Don't forget to like this video if you loved it, subscribe if you want more of this, and hit that freaking bell if you just can't live without it. Much love, Real out.